Okay, so now we are ready to move on to the next step. So we have with us some clear acrylic medium, a tiny bit of red yarn, and some sandpaper. So now we're ready to move on. Let's get to it. The very first thing we want to do now that all of our layers of white paint have dried is to sand our eyeball here. So let's move our stuff over. We just want to find any of the rough spots and smooth them out as best we can. Like I said, it's not going to be perfect. I didn't make the eye. I'm just trying to patch it up a little. Yes, I could take the time and really make this really nice, but instead, I'm just going to make do. We'll try to hide some of the blemishes with the finishing parts of the technique here. But I am using my really smooth sandpaper. That way, we can get that nice, smooth finish. All right, the next step is to go ahead and put in my pupils. So if I remember correctly, we're gonna, I think Gary has some big eyes. So I'm gonna try to go ahead and mark out. And I'm using a darker pencil than I would normally use, just so it'll show up on the video better. So I wanna go ahead and measure this out so that I get it the same on both sides. Pretty close anyway. Let's double check. Pretty close, pretty close. All right, something like that, and then we'll connect the dots. We'll go ahead and go a little bigger on this side too. That way, instead of making that one just a little smaller, we'll make this one a little bigger as well. That way we get that cartoony look. There we go. Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that mark I made. Happy accident. Alright, so those are where my pupil and my iris are going to be. Okay, so now that I've got that drawn out, we'll come out and paint this later as one of the last steps. But right now we're ready to move on to the very next step. That's what we need this yarn for. So I'm just going to take a little bit of yarn. Probably about that much. Waste not, want not. And we're going to need our acrylic medium. So I'm going to go ahead and just coat the whole eyeball here. So I'll pour a little bit on here. Boop. Boop. And then I'll need my brush. So I'll go ahead and coat this out. This is some really good medium. Really has a really wet look when it's finished. So I was very satisfied with that on the other mask. Which is good because I just found this. So it's not my artistic genius or anything that picked this out. We want to lay this on nice and heavy. That's why I'm putting so much on there. We don't really need this much to make it look wet, but we need this much for the technique that we're going to use. We want this eyeball to look nice and wet, but we also want to give it some blood vessels, so that's what we're working on today. Which I may have accidentally got a little thread. I'm giving myself away here on an accident. I think dropped a little thread of my yarn there already. do one more little drop since I had to scrape some off. Okay, so the next step is to take some of this red yarn, kind of tease it out here, and then we're going to use this to make some very believable blood vessels. And we just kind of work that to the way that we want it to look. You can see when you have a lot of medium on there, then you have more control. And the reason I cut this a little shorter than what I thought I would want. That way, it usually does pull out a little longer than what you think. We're going to make a really nice bloodshot eyeball here. But I did kind of think about how long I wanted them to be, so it wasn't just completely spur of the moment and unplanned. So I didn't actually technically measure it out, but these are going to be some very bloodshot snail eyes. I probably wouldn't normally do it like this with it being this bloodshot, but since that was the whole point in doing the demo, I'm going to go ahead and go all the way. This is going to be a very bloodshot, stressed out Gary the snail. He's very upset about the pandemic. All right, maybe one more. I mean, like I said, this guy, you probably wouldn't want to do this to yours and put this much on there. I just really want to make sure you guys understand the technique. I'll put one more little strand on here. One thing I would warn is it gets a little difficult as you start. You want to make sure you got a sink nearby, because this stuff gets on your fingers and then it doesn't want to, you don't want to let go of the yarn then. There we go. All right, I'm really satisfied with that. As you can see, that really looks good. Looks a lot like blood vessels, and I can even take a little instrument and make it look even more, so I can kind of tease out some smaller vessels here in a minute. I'll just put a wad of that in some places too. I like them more linear, but you know, sometimes your blood vessels actually are like that in your eye, especially if you're bloodshot. So I'm not gonna be too careful. All right, looks like we're gonna need a little bit more. More longer one. Missed. All right. Put a thick one in the middle of all that really bloodshot tangle. All right. All right, so now we're ready for the next step, We're going to try and tease out some of these to make them look more like kind of split blood vessels. And you can use a needle for this, or you know, a nail, different things like that. But the one thing I don't recommend is that you use, we don't want to use a pencil. So normally we can use a pencil and stuff like this in a jam, but the pencil's going to leave marks on here, and this is pretty much the finished part of the eye. I may put some more coats on it once it dries, and we're gonna you know, paint over all this in the center. But other than that, we're pretty well there on this part, so we don't want to mark it up with a pencil. So here's a really good one. Let's split this out into a fork. Haha, now doesn't that look like a traditional cartoon blood vessel? There we go. So I'm just going to take, you could do this with a brush. I'm just going to do pat one more little layer out with my finger. Be real gentle with it. Kind of go in the direction I want the blood vessels to go. Maybe get some more of this over here that I dropped. Gotta be careful though, because I don't want that old raggedy paint to start getting loose and come out and come off and mix with my clear coat here. Alright, I really don't like this, how these two dark ones right here, they actually kind of make an implied line. So we talked about that before. So what I'm going to do is see if I can't split some of that and rearrange it so it doesn't make like an implied line that looks like a circle. Maybe change the direction. Even pull some of it off, maybe. Ooh, not all of it off. Let's not get crazy here. There we go. Maybe put a little more right here in the center. And then this empty spot right here kind of bothers me too. So I might fix that up real quick. It really doesn't take much, does it? Just the smallest bit of yarn can do this. All right. Now I'm satisfied with that. You always want to go over these things many times so you can see anything you don't like in time to fix it. Now that our eyes are dry, we're ready to move on with the next stage. I'm going to go ahead and paint in an iris and a pupil. So I've got my paint here, and I'm going to mix in several colors of orange. So I had to look it up. For some reason I thought Gary's eyes were green, but I got a reference photo. So that's what we'll be doing. As you can notice right here, I just want to point out real quick how nice this brush is. This is a brand new brush. So that's what they look like when they haven't been smashed down in the water for a long time, for many years. The paint I'm going to be using is red and yellow. As we know, these are two primary colors we're going to use to make orange. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in the middle. So I'm just going to make a very red orange like the eyeball of my Gary reference. But I'm going to make a lot of different values of orange, not just this one. So I've also got some white and black here in case I want to lighten them. I can also add more yellow or more red to this. So the very first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to come in here with make a very red orange like that drawing. And then I'm going to take some of this over here and add just a tiny bit of black to it. Whoo, look how crazy that got. So I'm probably going to come back and mix a little more in here. There we go. And that's why I don't dump all my paint all into one blob and mix it all together, because if I went back to try and correct that, it would take a lot of paint to try and correct. All right, that's the color I'm looking for the middle. I want this to be one of the darkest spots. So I'm just going to come in here and start putting a little Corona around. Whatever I do to one eye, I'm going to do to the other eye. I'm going to make sure my brush strokes are always heading out away from where I'm going to paint that pupil. Okay, so what I've done here now is I have put those directional brush strokes in here for a reason. Okay, so I always made sure to be very careful to go out from the eye, because I'm trying to create those little striations in the eye to mimic the iris muscle. Okay, so we'll learn about the iris muscle later on in this class, but we're trying to mimic that. Now, I also tried to get a little darker, just a little bit in places around here and there around the pupil, because that people's eye do that sometimes. I also put a darker ring around the outside. This people's eye also does that. I wanted to try not to get it so perfectly smooth around the outside of the pupil or the iris. That makes it a little more realistic. So I know it's cartoonish, I know it's silly, but I kind of want it to have this kind of weird, realistic quality to it. You know, not perfectly realistic, but I want there to be something really gritty and solid about this. So when this dries, I'll come back over and put another coat of clear coat on it. So one thing I will point out, though, is that even though it's going to be very shiny and it's going to have its own reflections, I went ahead and put in highlights in the eyes on the pupil, just because I want to counteract some of this. The paint is not very smooth right here on either one of these eyes, and when I'm going to be creating some very weird ripply small highlights on the eyes, and that's not going to be very believable. So I'm going to kind of counteract that with my own fake highlights, but I will be going back over this again with clear coat. One thing you will notice if you look at real eyes are that the pupils are a little wobbly, and so are the iris muscles. So that's something, you know, it's a little different than anime eyeballs here. So that's the kind of look we're going for. All right, the medium is dry. I've taken the time to patch a few little spots on the eyes. I'll keep doing that here and there. Now I'm going to start painting out his body. I won't include that on this video. I mainly wanted to show you how to do the eyes, so I'll kind of show you how those turned out. That's kind of what the blood vessels look like. I'll come around, clean all this up, painting the shell, and I will finish this project on another video. So if you want to tune in and check that out, it will be made available to you. And you know, you can learn some new techniques, but this, I just wanted to show you how to create these eyes. Really nice, glossy, wet looking eyes with really believable blood vessels. So that's a little technique that you can try. Just remember to be, you can use reference photos. Try to be sporadic and organic. Don't just put straight lines, you know. Try to give it a little bit of variety and try to be random, because humans have a tendency to try and do things that are very contrived and, you know, orderly and patterned, and it just does not look like it's natural. Okay, so that's what I would say. I also still need to probably put some little pinholes in here to see through, which should work really well. The eye is so deep that you should not be able to see a hole very well and see into the mask. The hole will be too small, and it'll be too deep and covered in shadows to even notice the hole. Until next time, I hope this helps some people.